Welcome to Hardcover Hooligans. My name is Danylo. Mac, I don't know about you, but I sleep well at night knowing that I'm well defended against a possible Mistborn attack, because in my kitchen drawer I have not one, but two rolls of aluminum foil. What are your Mistborn defense plans?
Paintball gun.
Paintball gun? Ah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Plastic. Unless there's micro metals in the paint. I don't know how that works.
Ooh, like poison paint? Could you...
Holy shit, baby. Or just I'd seduce them.
Acid paint.
Yeah, acid paint or my powers of seduction, I would say.
So, we started the second book in the Mistborn Trilogy entitled The Well of Ascension, published in 2007 by Brandon Sanderson, I believe the year after the first Mistborn came out.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So there was nothing else in between this and that? It's not like George R. R. Martin publishes a Fire and Blood and a fucking map book before he makes the next book? Nothing like that?
Say what you want about Brandon Sanderson, is he pumps them out for sure. For better or for worse.
I think, not to put the cart before the horse, but I think this one is for the better. I think this is pretty good.
Yes. Well, we'll get into that. We'll get into that. Let's go right into it. I mean, Normally with Brandon Sanderson, we have prologues. No prologue. I noticed that. It just starts right into it.
I actually thought I was listening to this one, and I actually thought that the thing had fucked up, so I went back to like my book, and I was like, wait, what? There's no prologue? No, we just get right into it. But it is not a direct... This is no Star Wars Episode 7 to Episode 8 5 seconds after the ending of the previous one. Oh, no. There's been a time jump.
It's 1 year later, a lot like high school.
Yeah, it's just like every semester of high school I'd black out and then I'd wake up 1 year later.
Well, and then the first 3 chapters of high school are the big review section to make sure everyone's on the same page about what happened.
That was rough, man. I was like, oh, here we go again. I felt cozy. It's like getting into a blanket made of thorns. You're like, yeah, nice.
Yes, so when we return to our heroes, Elend is the king of Luthadel and the Central Dominance, not as implied like the last thing, just king of everything now. Yeah. this like 20-year-old kid, which I think is a good choice.
Yes, I agree. I thought that was funny. Right away, they cleared that up. Immediately, this is a lot more geopolitically complicated. Because they mention other places in the previous book, but you would be forgiven for thinking the whole world takes place in 2 cities.
Yeah, there's an actual like world sort of beyond the city where stuff happens. And another big development is there's no adium cache. They were not able to find the Lord Ruler's
they couldn't
adium.
find it. That maybe it exists, but they did a bad job of trying to find it.
Yeah, I don't know have they looked under all the floorboards? Like maybe they just went.
I doubt they looked everywhere. Like it could truly just be in some dude's house that the Lord Ruler snuck in there at nighttime.
Just some guy he trusts.
Yeah.
But the big threat now is that Straff Ventures armies are camped outside of Luthadel, threatening to take it.
Big dick style. Just show up. Has that ever happened to you, Danylo? You ever move into your first apartment and your dad shows up to take it from you?
Yeah, my dad threatens to buy the building. No, never have I had to engage in an official parlay with my father. Damn.
I wish we could all. We should all have the opportunity to experience something like that at least one point in our lives, I think.
Meet your father's dozens of women that he keeps around. Yeah, so it's Straff Ventures outside of Luthadel, and Vin and her Kandra buddy are hanging out, protecting Elend.
Yeah, well, they're not buddies yet. She does not fuck with this guy at all. I feel really... this book... It started off... This book is written slightly differently, I feel, where, like, right off the bat, there are ideas and concepts being presented, and you, the reader, get to think about them and experience them in such a way where... So in the previous book, when Vin speaks to people who aren't white women, she's like, what the fuck are you talking about? I don't understand. But in this one, and you kind of read that, and at least I was like, wow, this is kind of weirdly written, because it has that stuff. We spoke about it in the beginning. There's like weird hints about slavery. I was like, what is going on? But that stuff's explained. But Vin is pretty prejudiced in the other book, and it didn't feel like that was going anywhere. But in this book, her prejudice towards the Kandra feels like it's like a literary tool. Like, you're not supposed to like Vin. And in the other book, I felt like I was supposed to like Vin and ignore the fact that she was like an asshole.
Yeah, or like, dislike this thing about Vin, even like as you're following along. Like a character in a book,
I thought it was cool. And that gets resolved. She deals with that.
I think, the big thing about starting this was... I'm not gonna lie, I was a little discouraged at the end of our last conversation because really? Rereading it, I was like, oh, like I don't know, like just rereading these books is a wild experience.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And then going into this one, I'm like, is this just gonna be like the same thing again? But like even at the beginning, even though the beginning this sort of has started out a little slower, it feels more like a real book. In a way that's readable, which like exactly we can talk about whether that stuff is like well done, but like it does the minimum to where it just feels qualitatively different than the first one.
Yeah, and there is no... I knew there was going to be more tutorials, and there are in this book. I mean, there are reviews of the magical powers, but this is all that needed to be there in the first place.
I know I thought about that too, where like... So it like in the first or second chapter, Vin gets like attacked by a bunch of, misting almancers, whatever. And she like takes them down using all of the metal powers. And like each of them gets like a little sentence or two in a paragraph. And I'm like, this could have all been there in the first book. And I would have completely gotten it probably.
What's interesting is that the book does do that. When Kelsier burns down that dude's plantation, it does say the book is like he pushed against this guy, and that would have been the perfect thing to just be like, iron lets you do that, and then that's it. We just need that because that's exactly what happens here. It's like a cool action scene. I thought all the action scenes in this book are a lot better than the ones in the previous book, and I don't know if that's just because there's less like, let's get it out of the way. Ladies and germs, Kelsier is not in this book, so automatically it gets bumped up 3 points on my scale. I think any book that does not have Kelsier in it is at least it can't go below a 6 out of 10. And it's cool to see Vin kick ass. I don't know, the action that action scene where she fights all those alamancers is fucking sweet. I don't know why I thought that was so cool, but I did.
As we mentioned before, Elend is not just straight up king of everything. He's actually like formulated a government based on his political knowledge. And there's like an assembly, which is kind of like a senate. And there's like all this like, there's ska merchants now. And it's like, and I think it's like, okay, this is interesting. Like after the fall of the big 1,000-year way of doing things, like what sort of forms in its place, what sort of conflicts happen. And I think when I read the book the first time, like, oh, this is like an interesting world building thing to think about. Like, okay, what would happen?
Yeah, it's super cool. This is exactly what I mean. Like, okay, so Ellen's first thought is that it has to be a monarchy. So there has to be a king. But it seems unfair to give the king all this power, so he introduces this like parliament. But that's not a monarchy then. If the king can't do anything unless he has the votes by the parliament, that is not what that is anymore. So I thought that was he's like, I don't know, he just kind of took two governments and smashed them together, and as we will see at the end of this 2 sections, that was maybe the wrong decision. Was to form the, what are they called, the assembly? Is that what they're called?
Yeah, it's called the assembly with a capital A. Oh, I don't know if we said we read part 1 and part 2 of The Well of Ascension,
which is like half the book. It's a lot of it.
This would be what like a 22-year-old
guy
would maybe, who was passionate about politics like come up with, you know? At least it's not a libertarian, you know?
I know, yeah. Everybody, all the Scott can do whatever they want. It doesn't matter. It's cool because it's like a political system in the way that literally a philosophy 101 kind of douchebag would maybe come up with, who's like a good guy at heart, but is kind of like an asshole, would probably come up with. Also, I think it's so interesting that they call the fall of the evil emperor the collapse. That is not what I would call something good. So I think it's interesting that they've all already internalized that something... I understand, like, the regime has collapsed, but if you refer to the collapse, capital C, I would not think of that as a good thing, but it is a good thing. But is it a good thing? Because...
That's the thing, I think, like, as readers, you know, objectively, it is a good thing, like, ethically, but like as we find out, like we'll talk about the next part where like Sazed is out in the countryside trying to like teach the Ska everything he's like remembered and learned for these thousands of years, and they like don't care and they don't have time to care.
We don't have crops.
Like we're gonna die this winter. When is the Lord Ruler coming back? And he's like, no, it's, you know, because he at least gave them crops. And so then like here's where like the morally, you know, this is how you sort of do morally gray.
Yeah, this is good.
Better.
So what the fuck was happening in the first book?
I think too many things to where, I don't know. I think it was like too clinical.
Yeah. I also think that this is a much more interesting story than we have to get the evil emperor. Like, this is already a much more interesting... Like, if it was just this book, I'd be like, oh, what's going on? But, because, like, obviously the fucking emperor is evil, and they're not going to get to him, and he's going to be like, I was actually really nice. He does kind of do that, but it's, I don't know. There's not immediate repercussions. Oh, also, in the first battle scene, just going back, just a little plot point, Vin is being followed / watched by the Watcher. And he wears black clothes and he goes on the rooftops. Fuck Ellen as a self-insert character. This is Brandon Sanderson's self-insert character, because I bet you every time somebody talks to him, the first he's like, kill him. Like, something in his brain is like, slaughter him.
Yeah, I think, Brandon Sanderson is actually Zane. Like, this is the first. He has to... The reason he's so nice is a lifetime of suppressing his urge to kill everyone.
Yeah, Zane is what if Brandon Sanderson didn't start writing books.
Yes, the Watcher is Zane, which we find out later. We can talk about Zane a little bit later. But we get Sazed's POV, and he's out doing his thing, trying to teach Ska, and then he sort of is following this trail of rumors that the mist is staying out at night, or during the day, and that it is actually killing people, which has never really happened. Like, it gives them a seizure, and then they collapse, and sometimes they get up, and sometimes they don't.
That's what they... Wait, how does part 1 end? What is the final scene? I don't remember it being... Does she talk to the spirit? Or does she see the spirit?
Yeah, this happens in this first section, too, where so Vin at some point sees, like, a mist figure. She sees it. She just sees it, I think, and follows it, and it has some sort of allomantic pulse and then disappears. Another Vin plot point is that there's the Church of the Survivor is sort of growing, and they all want Vin to, like, tell them what to do, and she's like, no, this is weird. I don't like this.
I think that's so cool, and I think it's cool that the Steel Ministry is still around.
Yes.
Like, as a religion.
Well, and that the, like, in terms of, like, the world build, like, the politics stuff, like, yes, keep the obligators around because they know how to, like, structure and organize people and governments, even if they're not in charge still. Like, don't just kill them, because then you'll lose all that knowledge that you need to, like, run a city.
And I did not know that this was going to be how this book went, but it is definitely public knowledge that Vin is the one who killed the Lord Emperor, or the Lord Ruler.
I mean, some people believe it, some people don't, but...
Oh, sure, but the rumor is that it's her. I didn't know if that, like, wasn't going to ever be revealed at all, but She is the heir to the survivor. That's what they call her.
And she doesn't like it.
Lady Heir. I think that's so. Michael Kramer, I believe, is the man who reads the audiobook. He busts out some great voices for some of these people. He busts out Southern accents. It's crazy.
Really?
He did not. Yeah, for those dumb hicks that Seiza teaches, they do have kind of Southern twangs.
That's a bold choice.
I know, it really. I was like, that's insane. And then I think the big tough guy who meets Vin towards the end of section 2, who's like really sad, he's like, Lady Air. Like, I hope you're not going to abandon us or nothing. And it's like, what the hell? It was great.
Yeah, I think it's when you run out of voices, you gotta
default to Southern.
The mists are coming out during the day.
Yeah. Also, the pre-chapter things are being written by that dude who's mentioned in the first book. It's Orton. I didn't write it down.
Is it mentioned in the first book?
He is mentioned as traveling with them, yeah. Because the Elendil, who we get his name, that's the hero.
Wait, what'd you say?
The guy, the pre-chapter journal entries are being written by one of Elendil's
I don't think his name's Elendil.
That's what the first hero's name is.
Alendi.
Oh, Alendi. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Well, that's too close to Elend.
Yeah, I know. I know. That's why I couldn't remember which way I was conflating it with Elend was. And it's so on the nose where I'm like, what are we doing here?
Same guy.
His name is the same guy? That'd be crazy. He got pushed in the well of Ascension. He became a 22-year-old philosopher. Oh no!
That's the big betrayal. Is that?
That's what your betrayal. This is akin to your friend being like, "Hey man, what classes did you sign up for?" You tell him, and then you ask him, and it's like, "What did you sign up for?" And he goes, "Yeah man, I got a philosophy 101." You bury your head in your hands because for the next 3 months he's gonna be like, "What if I don't know? What if there was like this trolley, like and one person was tied down."
That's definitely Elend.
Absolutely. But yeah, it's being written by one of the terracemen. I don't think they're called terracemen at the time, right? Or are they?
No, they're called I think they're called Clenny. I think the land is called Clenium.
But he's traveling with them and saying like, "Hey, I'm not sure about this Alendi guy, but he seems cool, but he's kind of becoming somebody different," which is interesting because maybe he's not dead.
And we do find out where all these things are written later in the section.
We do?
Yeah.
Oh.
Let's talk about right now.
Oh, yeah.
So
all right.
Marsh meets up with Sazed, and he's like,
right.
"Come with me."
Yeah. Duh.
And Sazed's like, "But I got it." He's like, "I don't. Come with me."
I know. Seiza is teaching a class, and then he essentially turns around, and there's a big man who's like, "We have to go on an adventure." It's really funny.
Not even do you want to go on an adventure. It's we're going on an adventure.
Yeah. And I like how they've become sort of weird friends.
I know you really didn't like Marsh in the first book. Inquisitor Marsh is great.
Yeah. Well, because when he's Marsh in the first book, I was like, there's something missing. Why is he so depressed and boring? But now it makes sense that he's depressed and boring because he has metal spikes in his eyes.
Well, it's almost, and that's another thing with the first book is he was written pre-Inquisitor. He was like, okay, one of these people needs to become an Inquisitor. What kind of a person would become an Inquisitor? Oh, like the boring, depressed one.
Yeah, I know.
The one who's most like an Inquisitor becomes an Inquisitor.
I like their friendship, and Sazed even comments. I don't know. No, it's in his thoughts. He definitely doesn't say it out loud. He's like, he is purposely trying to be friends with Marsh because he knows that none of the other people are gonna be able to do it. None of them are going to be able to look at him.
And there are apparently more Inquisitors who are gone. And so Marsh and Sazed go to the Conventicle of Saran, which is where all the Inquisitors are. And I mean, the first time I read this book, I didn't remember a lot from it, but I did remember this because it's very cool. They go to a crater. And it's just this building made entirely of sheets of metal with no windows, no light. It's crazy.
And they open the door and it doesn't make a sound. That's what the door just opens and there's no creak or anything. It just opens. And also, is there mist in this crater, or is that the valley that the guy died in that Sazed was learning about?
I don't know if I don't think it mentions if there's mist here or more than normal. I think it's where the guy died.
Because there's mist during the daytime now, which is an important thing.
Yes, and I think that is... Well, we can talk about the bad guys, or like sources of threat in this book feel more like interesting and like actual sources of threat like you find in a book.
I know. I know. It's not an instruction manual for a video game you never play, which is what Mistborn is.
So, yes, they go to the conventicle, which needs to be a word that's used more.
Yeah, I know. It's so... Ugh. I knew we were in for a ride when this name gets dropped. I was like, oh, this is like a real fantasy novel now, baby.
So Marsh confirms that the mists are coming during the day. Which says it's like, these people have been saying, it's like, mists come during the day now.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And says it like, are you sure? And he just doesn't say anything and walks away.
Yeah. I've never been more sure of anything in my entire life.
I feel like Marsh doesn't say things he doesn't know for an actual fact are true.
Yeah.
Back at the Luthadel Ranch, Vin is tired of Orsur's the name of her Kandra, who, like, the contract was transferred from Kelsier to Vin when Kelsier died. And now Orsur has to do everything that Vin says. And Vin is annoyed that he, like, has a human body that he constantly needs to, like, upkeep. So, I don't know why I was so thrown off by this scene, but Vin just, like... She's like... It, like, skirts over it. But Vin just, like, fucking kills a dog by punching it in the head.
Vin, the main character of this book, goes to a dog salesman and she says, I'd like your meanest, biggest dog, please. And she goes, and he's like, refuses to sell it to her. So she goes to the back room where I guess she knows it's there. I don't know. They kind of just brush over this. And she goes.
This whole scene feels extremely brushed over, which I think is so funny. Because like it needs to happen. It makes total sense. Like, you have to write this scene. You can't just have Vin all of a sudden have a dead dog without writing the scene of it.
I know, but she hits it in the head really hard, and then she kneels down and she just kind of says, "Hey, I'm sorry about this," as if like it's gonna ever be the same. It's not coming back.
Well, it never even says like she killed the dog. Like it feels so carefully written to be like, oh, the dog's just asleep. But like but Orsur's not gonna eat the body unless it's a dead dog. So the dog died. It's so straight. Like, it's so strange.
It's crazy. I couldn't believe it. I loved it. Vin
will slaughter like 8 people in 2 pages, but like we're gonna tiptoe around her like killing a dog out of convenience.
It's so awesome. This is my favorite scene in all the books so far. I want there to be a spin-off novel about that dog salesman after this little girl just killed the one he was going to sell to like a royal house.
Oh my god.
Oh, it's awesome.
Because it is, I do feel like, Orsur needs to be a dog. Where you can like see the threads of like, all right, which means, they can only eat dead people, so Vin has to find a dead dog. Like, where are we gonna find a dead dog just randomly? And like, there's no easy way, there's no 2 ways about it. It's Vin's gonna have to kill a dog.
If you can't find a dead dog, you gotta make a dog dead. That's what I always say.
And you can't like pay someone to kill a dog. That's too long. That takes too long. Like, we just need half a page where all of a sudden Vin has a dead dog and it's fine.
Yep,
it's fine. Don't worry about it.
But now Orsur is his actual name.
Yes.
Okay. So Orsur is now a dog, and he's not super jazzed about it.
No, he's a little crabby. But I mean, I would also be crabby if I were him.
Yeah.
His whole thing, like the whole Kandra thing, is they have what's called the contract, and they have to always serve, human beings at all times, no matter what they do. And Vin doesn't like Orsur, and Orsur doesn't like Vin, but they're sort of stuck together.
It was like a like a buddy cop movie that they're before they're friends. That is what it feels like.
It is.
I really enjoy their conversations when they're not getting along, because I'm like, there's a lot of book left. I know they're getting along. Like, I know that's coming. So I'm excited for that. And I was right. So
You were. We also have a new metal, new allomancy metal alert. It's an alloy of aluminum called Duralmin. And eventually Vin finds out what it does, and it... when you burn it while burning other metals, it like burns them really quickly all at once to give you like a huge surge. But then when it's gone, it's all your metals gone.
yeah, and it is all of them all at once. It's not just the one you were burning. Or
I think it is just the one you're burning.
Okay, see, I thought it was all of your metals, and then there's a point way later where she uses it and then can suddenly use her other metals, and I was like, this son of a bitch, but I didn't go bother to back and shit.
Because I think the first time she did it, she was burning a couple at once, because it was in the middle when she was fighting Zane. She was like, okay, let's see what'll happen, and then like her bronze and her tin and everything went off at the same time.
And the first time, yeah, no, you're totally right, because in the first time she burned it, nothing happened, because she wasn't burning any of her metals. So you're absolutely right. That's a cool idea, and I also I love the idea of there are probably a shit fuck ton of other allomantic metals out there, and it's just that, like, it's just been these 10 because they're probably the 10 most common, I guess. But who knows?
Or like the 10 that, like, with the fact that it was like the Lord Ruler and the Obligator, like they kept aluminum secret because they wouldn't want other people to know about it because they just had that much control. And like the people who were able to make these metals, you know, wouldn't necessarily have the time or the materials to experiment.
Yeah. So I'm sure more metals are coming, which I'm excited about because I like the idea of Duralamin or Duralmin or whatever. I think it's
Duralamin.
Super cool.
That sounds a lot better than what I've been saying.
That's how the audiobook says it, Duralamin.
We'll go by audiobook pronunciation rules. So the end of part 1, I think we find out that the Watcher is Zane, and there's like tension between them because he's like, no one gets you except for me, Vin, because we're Allomancers.
I thought, doesn't part 1 end like the last page or whatever is like there's a spy, maybe? Or is that part 2?
Maybe that is part 1. Yes. So yeah, there's 2 things that happen at the end of part 1, which a second army arrives.
Oh yeah.
Which is Set's army, and they're like, what's this new army? And then Breeze is like galloping out on horseback.
Yeah, that was cool. I thought he was like an action hero, but no, he had sex with a little girl.
So... I don't know if they had sex. It doesn't say they had sex.
That's true.
Just got a little crusher-rooney going on.
Yeah. I don't know how old any of these people are. So when they said that the girl was 18, I was not appalled. But I didn't know how old they were, and all of the Vin was appalled. So I was like, "Is Breeze like 70?"
I think he's like 45. I think he's
all right. That makes sense.
And then this is the second army comes, and the whole political part of it is that like now Straff's army can't take Luthadel without opening themselves up to attack from the other army. So they're sort of a standoff, if you will. And then at the end of this part is where there are some guards in the palace. Go to Vin and Ellen. You're like, we found some skeletons. And then one of them was Orsur's previous bones before he took the dog. But another pair were from someone else. So there's another Kandra somewhere that's spying.
Yeah. At first I thought it was Captain Demu, but why would he alert Vin to the fact that there's a spy?
I don't know. That sounds exactly what maybe a spy would do. Double.
I think it's Doxin.
Because he's the only one that's not an Allomancer.
Right. And so it's the only one that wouldn't be able to be tested.
Yeah. And so the big thing is that Kandra can't use Allomancy. So if anyone is seen using Allomancy, which Vin tests a bunch of people, they can't be the spy. I mean, would you be sad if Doxin was dead? Who'd organize all like the calendars and to-do lists?
I know. Well, it's just because everybody else gets along with Elend except for Doxin. That's the only reason why I'm so suspicious. And I know Doxin's history with the nobility is bad, but that would also, I mean, that's a perfect excuse for, like, the Kandra to not be around Elend enough to accidentally blow their cover, because Orsur lets Vin know that it is an act. Like, it doesn't it can't, like, magically perfectly imitate anybody. Like, they are acting and could theoretically be bad at it and give away the fact that they're not really who they say they are. And Orsur mentions he is average. Like, he's fine. So there are people who are way better and there are people who are way worse. So I think this Conjure's way better. But I do think it's one of the crew, and I think it's Doxin. It's either Doxin or Spook, but I don't think it's... I really don't... Oh, no, it's not Spook.
Yeah, because Vin tests him for the Almancy, yeah.
So never mind. Oh, yeah, Spook's back. He comes back.
Yep.
He has a fake beard? I don't know
there were like a scene or two where it felt like a holdover from the other book where it's like the crew's just hanging out and we get to see what everyone's been doing. Another thing I'm noticing about like Sanderson's writing style is like under no circumstances can plot and like character stuff happen at the same time. Like they have to be separate.
Yeah, it's weird. It's super weird. It does actually, that does happen at the end of part 2 during the parlay. I thought that was cool. I mean, it is literally segmented though. Like Elend is doing the plot and Vin is dealing with character conflict, and they are separate, but it is technically happening at the same time.
But it is through the plot. Like Vin is also still doing stuff. Yeah. So then it's. That's the other thing, too, about this, too, where it feels like, oh, you know, when you run into the stuff that, like, other books have that the previous one didn't have, you're like, whoa, this is great.
I know, yeah.
And that's part of the experience of, like, rereading it, too, which is, like, it's almost like it's like comparing it to itself before, like, makes it seem maybe better than it actually is. That doesn't mean it's not enjoyable.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I think that I still think there are parts of this book that are not good. I mean, and they're the same parts as last time. Like, Spook is not funny. And it's really terrible when he's like, "Ising is the farting of the poop," or whatever. I think that stuff is terrible. That's a direct quote. It's the review on the front cover. I think that stuff is just the worst, but I think that, and I was really dealing with this. I was like, did I just drink the Kool-Aid, or is this actually good? Like, am I just invested in this now, or is the book actually good and that's why I'm invested? Or does it matter? Does it even matter?
I don't know. Does it matter? Wait, let's put a pin in that and come back at the end of part 1, because I have had lots of the thoughts about this whole series where it's going on a reread. Okay, so part 2 starts. We are back at the Conventicle of Saran with Marsh and Sazed, and this is where they find a bunch of dead bodies. I think like before the Inquisitors left, they just like killed all the servants that were there.
They got fucked up. There's like, that image is so incredibly violent in my head of like, well, we can't bring them, so line up. And then they just started hacking.
Well, and then also they like find like the human shaped like molds or like trays where like other Inquisitors are made, and like other spikes, and it's all made of like metal. I imagine like it's like dark and dingy, and everything's like brushed steel, and like has kind of like black blotches that are like dried blood and stuff.
And it's pitch black because they don't need light to see,
because they just see through all the metal, which is why everything made of metal, so they can see everything around them.
It's so cool.
And Sazed's like, I'm gonna need a flashlight.
Yeah, he's like, no way I'm going in there, sister. And then Marsh is like, what are you talking about? Okay, fine. See, stuff like that is funny. The fact that Sazed, it's just like a character moment where he's like, I'm not fucking going in there without a light. Like, that's crazy.
Like, Marsh, too, like, comes from a character. Like, he's so, like, matter-of-fact and, like, in a straight line that he didn't even think that Sazed would even, like, what? I guess you can't see.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I think he says, like, can't you just use your tin? And he's like, that's not how it works, idiot. And he's like, oh, okay. And also, it's pretty funny that why do they have torches? Like, why do the Inquisitors have torches?
Well, I think it's said because of the servants. The servants still need to see.
Oh, that's right. They're not just... Okay, so I wonder... I must have mixed that up because when they go down there's a funny moment where they're descending into the crater and Sazed finds an elevator and he's like, we'll just use this, and Marsh is like, there's nobody at the bottom to pull the pulleys, and then he just cuts it and it crashes to the ground. He's like, okay. But there's when they descend, Sazed remarks that there's like chains in the rock, so people must have been chained there.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I wasn't thinking of them as servants. I was thinking of them like slaves, and because I was thinking of them like slaves, I was thinking like, whoa, what is the work they're doing? But I don't know. I mean, they could be. I mean, I don't know if there is an answer to this in the book, but I think that the people chained up outside are like going through a test to become inquisitors or something like that. I think it's all part of the process.
I mean, someone has to, carry all the spikes and all the buckets of blood,
That's
from
true.
room to room.
Yeah. It is so scary in there, and it's so scary that Marsh is like, there's no way you're going upstairs. No way.
Well, and then that was interesting too, like another character thing. He's like, I don't mind that you see all the violence that the Inquisitors have done, but I just don't want to be with you when you do.
Yeah.
Like, that's cool.
And that also must mean that he has done some of the violence, right? Because
surely, because he has to blend, or he at least was blending in.
Yeah. Even if he was just pretending to be evil, like, I mean, undercover, people in like, you still gotta do shit if you're undercover, and like, especially in a situation like this. So I get it. It's a cool character moment.
And like, you get the sense that he's not the Marsh he was. It's not like he's just pretending. Like, the fact that he's an Inquisitor now, like, he has changed on a deep level. He's not just like, I'm still your friend Marsh, I just got goofy nails in my eyes.
Yeah, I know. Which I was actually worried about that. That's how it is at the end of the first book.
Yeah.
When they are hanging out on the rooftop, that's exactly what it is. Like, Marsh is the same.
Marsh is just like eating a sandwich
with
a glass of wine.
Drinking a big gulp, doing advertisements. I don't know. It's, yeah.
And I think that's part of the thing too, like my experience of rereading the first book. Like, I forgot how much my impression of things was like retroactively modified by the other books, like by this book. Like, like I didn't see Marsh the way you saw Marsh. I saw Marsh, like I saw this Marsh,
Yeah, this is cool. And also I think that the crew are a lot more defined, and I don't know if that's just because they're not always together, and so they don't have the opportunity to like blend together in my head and ruin scenes. But when they're all separately, I think they're great. Like, Ham is awesome in this book, and I hated him in the first one.
Well, I think the thing, like, they are now in their proper place as minor characters.
Yes.
Like, I think in the previous book, like, we talked about, like, it was trying to do too much at the same time. Like, Sanderson was like, okay, I have all these definite ideas about these crew members and how each of their personalities is, and I need to make sure they are, in every scene that they're in, we are having them be fleshed out by saying stuff and doing stuff, because in my mind they're all separate and different. But then that ended up being like, why are these people talking like this? This has nothing to do with anything.
It just doesn't work, and it works really well here.
Because I think they are, like, they have a purpose, or if they don't, they're like, okay, we're here, we talk about a little thing, and then they're done.
They just don't have time to get... It's like when we were talking about Elend in the first book, I was nervous. I was like, I really like Elend, and I hope that's not just because we don't have a point of view chapter where he gets ruined. That's like what's going on here. They just don't have enough time on screen to make themselves annoying.
Yeah.
And this book makes fun of Ham's dumb philosophy in a way that the other book, I feel, wanted me to take seriously. Which I really appreciated. Like, Breeze just straight up is like, you're a fucking idiot, dummy, idiot,
he'd say, like,
he's
idiot. Like, I would say something and you'd say just the opposite, just because you're... He's like one of those, like, Pam is like the free speech, like, guy. It's like, whatever anyone else is saying, you'll just say the opposite, just to be like, did you ever think about this?
Yeah, I know. So I love that he gets called out on it, because that's what I'm screaming at the book while it's happening, and I'm glad that I'm not the only person who thinks that.
But back to the the adventures of Marsh and Sazed, which, I wish this part was longer. Because it's so great. I wish they explored other stuff.
I wish he went upstairs.
Yeah, but he went downstairs.
But he does go downstairs.
And he finds an old engraving on like a steel plate.
Yeah, so it's just a room. So it's just you go downstairs and it's a room and there's an engraving right there.
I think so.
Yeah, I think so too.
Like it's at the bottom of the stairs and just like the stair stops like a stairwell and there's like an engraving. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's cool. Like just a stair. Like why is it? Oh yeah, man, that was so cool. Like why is it there?
Well, and then it's all, and then Sazed starts to read it, but Marsh comes up behind him and is like, "We gotta go." So Sazed takes like a rubbing of it,
and it's the pre. Is it not the first pre-chapter entry?
It's So it's all of the pre-chapter epigraphs come from this rubbing. Yeah,
and like we said, we know that this is being written by Elendi.
I think so. Elendi was the guy who was supposed to be.
Yeah, I mean, it's being written by his friend.
Who I think is Quan. I think his name is Quan.
Quan, thank you. Quan, Rashik, and Elendi are the three bros, and we're going on an adventure that didn't end so well. But we don't know what happened to Quan. At least I don't think so. He's mentioned in one of Elendi's journal entries in the first book, but I don't know if he is referred to as dying. I don't know. I think maybe Rashik does kill him. I don't know if I remember that or not.
I feel like Rashik was a bit on a killing spree towards the end there.
He was kind of a silly guy. Hey, everybody makes mistakes, man. We don't know what happened at the well. There could have been an accident.
Not a lot of people make one long 1,000-year mistake, though.
Well, not a lot of people get the opportunity to do that, Danylo, so I feel like you're being a little judgmental.
You're right. The Lord Ruler, it's fine.
Yeah, the Lord Ruler did nothing wrong. That's my hot take. Hopefully, I don't get proven right because maybe he didn't do anything wrong.
So yes, we are in the beginning of part 1 still. Then Sazed and Marsh travel for a bit longer, and then one morning, Marsh is just gone without saying anything, and Sazed like waits for him for a couple hours, and it's like, well, okay.
It almost like he definitely. What I thought was like Inquisitors were on their tail or something, and he had to go. Because there's no way he would just do that. He had to. There had to be an emergency.
Or like maybe that room wasn't empty. He was just lying.
Or maybe, that'd be fucked up if Marsh actually loves being an Inquisitor. He's a bad guy. That would be fucked up. For some reason, I doubt it.
Yeah, he becomes a super good guy. starts playing guitar.
Yeah, he joins a band. He takes the spikes out of his eyes. He just has beautiful baby blue eyes. Who would have thought? Just take him out.
He has to wear he takes them out. He has to wear like sunglasses.
Of course.
And every time it's like, take those glasses off, Marsh. We want to see your eyes. And they're just holes looking right through his head.
He's like, bah, no, you don't want me to do that, guys. He wears a Hawaiian shirt and cargo shorts all the time. He's a cool guy, man.
Playing songs like Margaritaville and Cheeseburgers in Paradise or whatever.
And he starts going by a different name. Maybe Jimmy something. I can't think of the last name.
Jimmy Marsh? Marsh?
Oh, that'd be awesome. What a crazy third book. It's just all about Marsh's rock and roll career. It has nothing to do with this. That'd be awesome.
Marsh actually once asked Corona to sponsor him. They said no, so he made his own beer.
Yeah, he has a beer and he has a whiskey sour in a can. You should try it out. I don't know. I heard it's pretty good.
Big restaurant chain. Marshville.
Oh my god. They serve, it's like a Mr. Beast burger. They serve all the food on the back of a Perkins, but it's called Marshville. It's kind of one of these ghost of kitchens or whatever.
Yeah, there's burgers with like metal shavings and just like glasses of blood. Ooh, with lime in it.
Yeah, of course. Well, he couldn't get the deal from Corona, but he loved that lime, so he had to do something.
Okay. Anyway, Marsh does not become this universe's Jimmy Buffett. I mean, maybe that's why he left. That was his idea. He was
have to go.
I have a great idea. I can't tell anyone I'm doing this. They're like, there's a new concert coming through Luthadel? It's Marsh.
Well, it's weird. Set's army is having a cool party down there. Who's playing down there?
A sound of steel drum is wafting through the night air.
The ash falls fell and the steel drum moved like mist through the night. Oh man, that's awesome. Man, I can't wait for that.
I think that's our fan fiction. We're gonna write that.
Yeah. We'll have a community run fan fiction all about that. And you can add it whenever you want, just so long as it ends up tying back to Jimmy Marsh's musical career.
So he said, I like the name Jimmy.
Okay.
Oh, why, Marsh? I just do. Be quiet.
I just do. Nobody, I've noticed, speaking of the name Jimmy, there has been it's been pretty good on fantasy names. I feel like we never talked about this. I feel like Zane is pushing it.
Yeah, because that's a member of One Direction.
Yes, and I've met someone named Zane in real life. Like, I know that it's a real name. I don't think there's been one at all, except for Ska, obviously, but that's... I feel like all of the fantasy names have been pretty good here.
And I think he's good at also making, like, you know, he doesn't have to make a whole language, but he's like, okay, so, like, all the terrorists' names are going to sort of have the same feel to them, or, like, all the noble names are sort of going to have the same feel, which is cool.
Yeah, it is cool.
But anyway, Sazed is by himself because Marsh has left on his musical career. And he finds a village where there's just a bunch of dead Ska. And he finds a survivor, and some of them were killed by the mist, and the rest of them, like, hid inside because the mist, like, hung out there in that village all day for, like, weeks or something like that.
Yeah. Or maybe not. They might have just not looked.
Yeah.
Because there's no way to open the door without the mist coming in. Except maybe there is. But maybe not this mist. I don't know.
Or they're just, like, scared. Yeah, I don't know.
But yeah, they fucking starve to death in there. And they eat their friends and family. That was fucked up. And there's one silly guy who's there who's not not as dead as he seems.
But that's all that happens there. As Sazed's like, I gotta get back to Luthadel.
Yeah, that guy who is not dead doesn't give any new information, does he? Or he just... I think he reaffirms the mist did this.
Because Sazed, for some reason, still isn't, like, 100% buying it.
Yeah, I know. This is what it takes. I feel like he buys it now. He gets it now. But this guy is... he's gone absolutely crazy, and there's a funny moment where Sazed becomes really buff and picks him up and takes him out of the house to show him that the mist is gone. But poor guy, man, I can't. That'd be really fucked up.
That's another thing, too, is, like, it feels like sometimes this book, like, it doesn't really... This is another thing, like, from the previous book. Like, it describes some pretty horrendous stuff, but it's, like, always vaguely, like, it's okay still, you know?
Yeah,
like, it doesn't...
yeah.
There's never, like, the point of view of this guy and all the emotional anguish he's suffered over the past couple of weeks. He's just, like, a minor character. You can, like, you see it, you understand the implications, but, like, you're never, as a reader, in it.
Yeah, it's violence as a plot point and not character motivation. Like, Sazed is not changed by what he sees. It is just he has new information. In fact, that's all of the... Like, you're so right about what you said earlier about the action / plot moving forward and the character things do happen separately. Like, there's a moment in the previous book, the first time Vin kills somebody, she is, like, moved by it. But that is not... I mean, it comes back again later at the end of part 2, I guess, but the book kind of doesn't care about that question for the first half of this book. It's just like, no, killing people with magic is fucking sweet, so we don't gotta worry about that.
Yeah, and, like, the things that happen and the things that characters do don't really, like, affect them or each other in any deep way other than, oh, here's the implications of that in terms of what I have to do next.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, yeah, you're totally right. There's no... I mean, characters have deep conversations, but they're like...
It's not about what happened and how it affected them. It's about, like, some other thing.
Yeah, and it's like the themes of the book for the reader. It's not really for them.
That's why I think it's going to feel like sanitized almost, or more YAE. Because I think also Brandon Sanderson doesn't like violence, but, like, in order to, like, have plot in a fantasy thing, like, you have to have some sort of violence. So, like, it is like a weird, like, it keeps it very PG-13.
It is PG-13. Yeah, because I noticed that in the first big stretch of this book, I was like, oh, there's that action scene where she kills those mistings and the one Allomancer bad guy, or the one Mistborn assassin, but there's really no I feel like Brandon Sanderson thinks that, and I could be wrong, but that the only point violence serves is to like be shocking
or to like be a plot point.
Yeah, like, oh, there has to be a battle now, and the battle has to be violent because it's a battle.
Well, and it's not I feel like it's not even violence. Like we see the effects of violence, like in the first book, like, oh, the crew was slashed, there's a bunch of blood everywhere. Like, we don't see them doing that. I feel like we see action, and I guess people die, but like that's not violence, you know.
And it's always just like, and his throat got slit, and I'm not. Yeah, and I want to make it clear
dropped. You know?
Yeah. He crumpled. I want to make it clear that I'm not saying I think the book is bad because there's no violence in it. That is not what I'm saying. I guess I'm just saying that it's weird that it's constantly shying away from it, even though you're telling a book about... It's a book about a society of oppressed people fighting against the ruling class, and you're so scared to talk about the violence. Like, well, it's just weird.
I think it's also like, you're scared to have what happens, like, deeply affect the characters in like a serious way.
Yeah, because you want to have a fun battle. You don't want to have that fun battle mean that like, oh fuck, well now Ellen has to be totally different now because of what happened in that battle, and it'd be weird if I just ignored it. But it's like, I don't know. I wish that this might be weird and this might not make any sense, but so Sazed, there's no reason that Sazed can't have seen the Mist do this, other than because once he arrives, he tells the crew about the Mists have killed people, and they don't believe him. But if he was like, I saw the Mists kill people, they would have just been like, it had to have been something else. Like, we achieve that same thing. I just feel like I'm not scared of the Mists because I haven't seen it.
Yeah,
it's showing, it's telling me, it's not showing me. Mm-hmm. Which I understand. Like, coming upon the aftermath of a battle and coming to some conclusion about it is not bad storytelling, but that's the only thing that ever happens.
Yeah.
Except for like the big there's fight scenes and the big battle at the end of the first book.
Mm-hmm. But the fight scene, but like the implication, the fight scene is like, oh, I'm out of adium now, which means next fight scene will be bad if they have adium. Yeah, like, it's not like, you know, oh, here's another, I just killed 8 people.
Yeah. Which is why the stuff with Zane, I think, doesn't work. And that's what I was saying. I don't know if I said this, but there's one thing I don't like at all so far, and it's that Vin is being like turned to the dark side or whatever, because she's like being, I mean, that's a cool thought. It's just that she has no reason to be sad about the violence, because we've never seen her be sad about the violence, because we never see the violence.
Yes, or sad about like being used by Ellen, which like there's never...
He's not doing
he
that.
Hasn't. He like only did it during the scene where she's upset about it. Like, it's not like he's never done it before. She's always done it voluntarily. She's always like, I'm going to check the windows. I'm going to go, watch you things.
He's always like, you're too paranoid, stay here. So what are you talking about?
Which I think some of it too is like, and especially in the first book, I think some of the issues with Vin's character do get hand waved away because like, it's trauma, it's childhood trauma, which I think it's sure, but it doesn't read like genuine childhood trauma. It just reads like a character with no internal struggle or consistent internal struggle. But like the main character has to have one, so I guess it'll be this one.
Except she solved it at the end of the first book, so now we need another one.
Yeah.
And it's that she's feeling used, or she's beginning to feel like she's being used. And I originally, like, it's so weird to me that she doesn't have a problem with the burner. Like, she does once against the guards, and then it's just awesome, badass stuff.
Mac,
and it's
Mac, that means we have to think about the fact that she's murdering people, and they're not just cool, fun action scenes.
I know. Oh, man, it sucks to think that that's just what it is, and there's no getting around that.
That you forget it's in such an emotionally fraught world where, like, ash falling from the sky, red sun, like, it's like a hellscape, but everyone's sort of just, like, mildly concerned about what's going on, and it doesn't really affect them. And I guess you can put that under the bucket of, like, oh, they're used to it. But, like, that also doesn't give the reader the experience.
We're not used to it.
Yeah, I know. That's why I always have to remind myself, like, no, she's not jumping through a forest. Like, there's no plants taller than, like, your ankle.
Yeah. Like, there's no... Like, it's so crazy how many of these issues get solved in The Way of Kings. Like, he realized it. So, the whole entire... If you've never read The Way of Kings, that book mostly follows... I guess not mostly, follows a character, I don't know, a shit ton of it. The most memorable parts of it take place in this, like, terrible battlefield, where Kaladin's his name, right?
Yeah.
He is the fish out of waters. Like, he is introduced to this terrible part of the world, and so is the reader. And it doesn't feel like a history lesson because this is, like, new. Like, oh, shit, like, this war, there's crazy shit going on, and, like, what's up with this? There's, like, monsters in the fucking ground, and crazy stuff's happening. But this is, like, these people have been living for 1,000 years, so there's no way they would ever question it. But it's crazy, like, it's crazy, and we have no opportunity to get to revel in how crazy it looks. Mm-hmm. Because it's not crazy to them. It just looks like that. And in fact, here we go again. There's another part where they're like, green plants.
I know, I thought about that too. Like, we did this already. We know they think green plants are weird. It's like that's the only way he can tell us how to remind that, like, everything's brown.
And it also doesn't matter. Like, I never think of things as everything is brown, and it's never important. So what does it matter that everything's brown? It doesn't have to be, other than, like... the state of the world is directly related to the false Lord Ruler, or at least that's
and they could have done more with, like, I think they start doing this, but, like, with, like, the crops and food, and it's really hard to grow. Like, they could talk, like, you could have done more like that, because, like, it does affect, like, oh, there's more ash now. And, like, maybe the ash could have had weather patterns, so we're always reminded of that they have to take into account. Like, I think there's ways you could have done it that would have been relevant to the characters.
Yeah, you're right, because the weather does change. Like, the night is coming sooner, and I guess the ash falls are falling more frequently now that the Lord Ruler is gone.
Yeah, and the mists are coming out soon.
Yeah, but it's just weird that, like, that's it. Like, there's no... It doesn't feel distinguishable yet. I mean, it might start to feel distinct, but, like, what the... I don't know what it falling heavy... I thought it was falling heavy the whole time. Like, I don't know what that looks like.
Yeah.
And that's the hard thing about setting your, like, world in, like, the post-apocalypse. Because you don't... So, in a video game, for example, like Fallout New Vegas, you're playing a character who... existed in this post-apocalyptic world beforehand, but since it's a video game, you have the opportunity to ask questions about the world, and then people react to you like, "What do you don't know this?" Like, they think you're an idiot.
Like as a video game, like, you can literally see it all around you as you're playing, which is, like, for words in a book, you have to, like, be reminded, or there has to be some sort of reason that the characters would be reminded of it.
And you know what's interesting? The first book started out, I think the first two, maybe the first three, but the first two chapters, prologue and chapter 1, begin with ash fell from the sky. I thought that's how every chapter was going to begin, and that's how it should begin, because then I would always remember, like, oh, that's right, shit is fucked up and terrible. I just feel like the world building, I think the world that this book takes place in is really lacking, and I think that there's no interesting character feelings about the world or the violence around them, because why would there be? It's just the world.
But also, like, yeah, I don't know, that to my mind, like, you could say, like, oh, it's just they're used to it, but, like, you know, ultimately you need to, I think, have, like, you're writing a book that other human beings in our world are going to read. And you want to read, you as a human being want to read books about other human beings in a different world. So like to have them have the characters act and feel more like normal human beings, I think would be good. And this sort of comes back to like I think it's a common criticism in these books that the characters aren't super fleshed out or interesting.
I don't think they suck. They're fine.
They're definitely a lot better in this book.
Oh my god, yeah, they are a lot better.
They're not all video game NPCs.
Yeah, I know. This book is that aspect of these books is a lot better in this book. Because I was trying to think, we were just talking about the, like, how do you... Because it sounds pretty dumb, like, if you're listening to this and you hear, like, well, the fantasy characters don't think the world is weird because they live in it. And, like, yeah, you're right. Like, that does sound fucking stupid. But I guess what we mean is, like, I'm trying to think of any other book ever. Okay, I was talking about George R. R. Martin earlier. In a Game of Thrones, there's not like a guy from our world who falls into that world and needs to learn, like, is spoon-fed the information about it. Characters in those books, you just kind of like absorb it.
It's immersive, I think, and that's like a writing thing. Like you can have characters immersed in the world and see things in a way that, from a certain way that they normally would see things, that would translate to the reader, because these are all like POV stuff.
Yeah, and it also helps that in most other books, places look different. Like in a Game of Thrones, in that first book, A Game of Thrones, there's a fucking 900-foot ice wall and like a cool like wintry castle, and King's Landing, which is like this bustling city full of...
Well, and they talk about how, like, you know, the northern dominants are more cold, and I think wherever they go to, like, the conventicle of Saran, like...
That's cool.
I think they talk about there's some different climate. Like, I imagine that more of, like, a windswept, sort of more deserty, but also, like, darker or something. And
what
like,
do you mean it's deserty? It would just be covered in fucking ash and it looks the same. Like the crater is cool. Like that's a cool image, and it's like sunken into this crater.
Well, and then occasionally, like, there's one or two sentences where a character like looks at the horizon and then like, oh, an ash mount is more active now, and they see like the ash coming from the ash mount. And like, why? Like, I feel like we should get those details all the time, or more. Like, wouldn't people always be looking at what the ash mounts are doing today, because that affects like how much ash they're gonna have to clean up later or something, you know? Or like, oh, then that affects the crops, and like you would have obligators who are keeping track of the ash mounts because the weather would influence the crops. Like you could do all that, I think, and it wouldn't necessarily add to the page count of this book.
Nope, in the first book, none of that can happen, because I need to know how the Ska eat. Do they get a meal ticket? What happens here? What
is
do you
there
mean
like a weird charity scheme, soup kitchen?
Whatever. All right, anyway.
I think, and that's, I mean, we could talk about this later too, or always talk about it now. Like, where it is so weird, because sometimes Sanderson answers questions you didn't know you wanted answered. And sometimes that's cool, and sometimes it's like, what? We could have used that somewhere else. And I think it's like, you know, revelations about lore sort of treated as plot twists. And that's, I think, part of it's not, but that's like part of the appeal. But like, there's a certain large amount of them, so it feels like super impressive, but individually, they're not super interesting beyond like, oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Like, you could learn about horrible history atrocities. You'd be like, I did not know that. Like, but it doesn't, like, I don't know. You can learn about crazy information. I don't know. It just feels like this. I feel like I've never experienced this in like other fantasy books, like being so bored by the fantasy world part of it. I don't know, like even books that like have very stereotypical fantasy worlds, you know. I mean, using the Lord of the Rings as an example is tough, because, you know, that's said a lot of it, but that's not boring.
I think it comes down to the characters.
Yeah,
like, I think part of what I'm having trouble with rereading these books is that like so much of the plot relies on like, one, not knowing what's going to happen, and like two, not knowing something about the world. And like once you know those things, say from having read it before, like I'm sort of reading these like desperately looking for anything that is not those two things. And like the characters in this book kind of did it. The characters in the first book did not do it. So like once you know what the magic system is, once you know where it goes, like, you know, other stories you can sort of appreciate how something happened or like certain character moments, but those things are so separate in this book, and like plot moves forward by either things that the characters didn't know was gonna happen happened, or like revelation about the world is like, whoa, now that makes sense. But like I'm rereading it, and so that does make sense. And so, like, it feels like beyond withheld information, there's just not a lot of meat on the bone in terms of a reread.
Yeah, that's what I mean, it's a story that rests on its twists, I feel, and that's not ever a good story. Like, that's not... Because you know who the Kandra spy is, so, like, why do you give... You're like, fuck, can we just get there already? Like, I'm sure that's how you're feeling. Like, you already know... Vin's like, I gotta test this person and do this person, and that's only interesting because of the mystery. It's not like a good mystery movie where you can rewatch it and see like, oh, there's the red herring. There's no red herring. She just tests them and then it's over.
Well, and it's like she, you know, maybe could this be like her betrayal stuff coming up again? I think it mentions it for like one section, and then like you could imagine like, oh man, you know, once Vin finds out who it really is, like that's really going to like I'm not looking forward to seeing her go through that again, you know. But like one, that stuff doesn't happen in these books, and two, like you don't care enough about Vin in the first place to be like, oh, what happens is going to affect them in some deep way, because nothing has affected anyone in any deep way to begin with, so why would you expect that to come later?
And just a note, it'd be way better if it wasn't a Kandra and it really was one of them betrayed the group, because like that's what Vin's whole thing in the first book is, and that's such a good way to dismantle it, and we can redo it again. Like, that's... Just fucking do it again. Because Reen didn't actually betray her.
I know, I was thinking about that too. Like, what is, like, okay, if we have to focus on the characters, like, because I'm like, I need to find something in these characters to, like, grab onto as a human being, because I know all the twists. Part of my thing is like, could you make it like Vin actually, like Vin never actually gets betrayed. She just feels like she gets betrayed.
Yeah.
So like we have a book where like she actually gets betrayed, and like maybe you say, oh, Kelsier lied to her, but like, you know,
that does not count.
No,
she didn't lie to, like, yeah, because she thinks that like, or sir, you hid this information from me. Like, why'd you do that? And he was like, what do you? Because I was told to. That's not a betrayal.
And
like,
that's what I say about like the shying away of like making characters actually go through something. Like they're mildly to moderately concerned about something and how it affects them. And then the twist is that thing was never true to begin with. Yeah. And everything's fine.
Yeah. It's not, yeah, they don't have to overcome anything because it was never there in the first place.
Yeah. They're concerned that they might have to overcome something, but the twist is there's everything to overcome.
Yeah, everything's fine.
Everything's fine and no one changes. So that's my experience of rereading these books. Which, and I feel for you too, where like it does, like, you know, it's the volume of things that make it compelling. And, like, at the end, you know, when he explains everything, even the things you didn't want explained, like, it removes that bit of mystery. Like, there's not even any mystery for me.
No,
because literally every question you have, Mac, because you're a smart reader, can and will be explained about every inch of this world and what has happened in it. And, like, yeah. I read things online. I'm like, why am I struggling with this book? And, like, people talk about, like, that's a great thing. Like, that's so cool. And I think it is on your first reread. You're like, wow, that was awesome. But then like it all sort of resolves, and then everything's fine. Like there's no open-ended, there's nothing that's super morally vague, there's no like conflicted characters. It's not, you don't disagree with their choices. Like everyone's sort of making generally the most logical, obvious choice, because they're all like default, they're like D&D intelligence 10, maybe 12.
There's no, it really feels like it's like a Marvel movie. Not to dunk on Marvel movies, but it's just like, yeah, the good guys, they'll win. I don't know.
No one's really gonna get too hurt or die unexpectedly. Like, you don't know what's gonna happen, but like, you feel like you know how you're gonna feel by the end.
Yeah, you're totally right. Like, I already am anticipating the feeling of finishing this book and being like, oh, and then that'll be it, and then I'll start the third one.
And it may be cool and unexpected and not exactly what you thought, but like, because I've read books where like, page to page, like, I have no conception of how I'm even gonna feel at the end of the next chapter about what happened, because there's just like crazy shit happening. And that's not just twists, like, that's very different than plot twists.
Yeah, it's fucking real good character moments. But that's not what this book is concerned with. It tries to be, though. I mean, this is definitely Brandon Sanderson's attempt with the Zane, and we'll talk about it more when that actually happens, but when Zane goes full tilt and trying to get Vin to switch teams, he's trying to do it there. It just doesn't work. And I think that this stuff actually does crop up in his other work. Like, there's, in The Way of Kings, there's probably 8 different times that Kaladin is sad and wants to kill himself. And every time that happens, you think it's the last time, because, like, I feel like we've learned enough and don't need to experience this again. And then, like, oh no, something bad happens again, because Brandon Sanderson needs to let you, the reader, know, like, he is responding negatively to this. And that is the next step from this, which is just nothing, but that's still not a great place to end up. Like, it needs to, I don't know, man, just write fucking better characters, hang out with people. I really, listen, I've never written a book, but fucking A, man, I've talked to people, I know.
Yeah. Or I have a soul, and I have like struggled in my life with things, and it's like very strange to be like, how does one struggle with this thing and like not being able to show it or know, like, I don't know, because like it's so like technically proficient, but like it is like story, but you got off on a technicality. Like, yeah, it's like if you got 10 on the paper, but like I'm not feeling anything.
Yeah. There is an exception to this, and it is at the very end of chapter 2. I think it is, part 2. I think it is fucking awesome what happens at the end of this part, excluding the Vin Zane stuff. The Elend and his dad stuff fucking rules. And I think that is so good. And it's just do that the whole book.
Or even like, I think you can earn those like 2 characters talking. Like, I was really digging the Vin or Sir scene, where they like open up about it to each other, and like, oh, maybe he doesn't know this about me, but like, this is how I'm feeling, and they find like some common ground after not like. That is how you do a proper like sit and talk character scene that feels good and like nice and satisfying to read.
Yeah, like that scene is awesome. I think that's actually next. So they Vin and Orsur oh wait, no it's not. Oh wait, yeah it is.
No, well,
yes,
we haven't even talked about Elend's new tutor. So Elend is like, who's that terrace woman? And it's Tindwyl, and she's here to train Elend to be king. And it's
hand waved away that Sazed just asked her to be there.
Yeah. Well, and I think I also too, and I wonder if it's just like my desperation for a character, interesting character things, and the fact that like, oh, Elend isn't just good at being king automatically and has to change things about it. It's like, okay, a character who is forced to change. That's sort of like story 101, but I'm like, oh, a breath of fresh air.
Well, it's cool because this introduces like Elend in him. He actually does start to change, and Vin is like, oh, I don't know if I like this person. And that's so good, but it's just, in a grand total, it's about 1,100 pages into this story.
Yeah, and like that's a character, like that is, events happen that influence how the characters, that makes the characters change, which influences other, like, it's just I don't know, like, it feels like
that's good.
It feels
good
out of place because it's what it's supposed to be, weirdly.
Yeah, I know. It just feels very, or maybe I don't know. I think that's a cool idea that I'm not sure I've really seen, is the boy king needs to actually learn how to be king and is not just good and everybody loves him. I feel like that's not something that I've really seen before, and I think that's why I like it so much, is that I don't think it's just good because the rest of this is kind of meh, but it's actually good and it's actually interesting. So yeah, what's her name? Telendil, right?
Tindwyl, I think.
Tindwyl, yeah, you're right. So Tindwyl is a fucking asshole, but she's doing it for the right reason. She's good at her job. She's trying to get Ellen to stand up straight and actually be a king. So, and this is good stuff too. She's purposefully like being an asshole to try to get him to be forceful with his language and in telling her to stop.
And then later when she's like being nice to Vin's like, why aren't you being mean to me? He's like, Ellen's been pampered his whole life. He can be mean. Like, you've had a rough time of it. I'll be nice to you.
Yeah. And then 20 seconds later, she's like, what the fuck is going on? And then she's like, I'm sorry, I have a hard time. So like, no, you are actually just a mean person, which is very funny.
Vin runs into the mist spirit again in like a building, which is strange. And it grabs her and like hurts her, which could be tied to the mist also out there killing people, you know?
Yeah, I feel like it is safe to say that this is the first manifestations of the overarching problem, which is, and I think it's such a corny name, the Deepness. Speaking of fantasy names, I think the Deepness is terrible. Just call it the Darkness. You can just do that. It's okay. We won't make fun of you.
But it has to be unique.
Yeah, I guess. But it's just funny where Vin sees a stat. Like, Mist is a pool. Like, Mist is... You've seen Mist in your life. It's like a pool. I don't know. You know what Mist looks like. And the statues of the Lord Ruler defeating the Deepness, they're like, what's that pool of stuff? I don't get it. Like, what do you mean you don't get it? It's the fucking Mist.
Well, I think it's portrayed as, like, black. Like, a black void in the thing, which isn't necessarily Mist. Mist is white.
I guess you're right. I've never seen Black Mist.
This is sort of detailed book reporting that you get here on Hardcover Hooligans.
Mist is white, folks. If you are in high school, tell your teacher that Mist is white.
That is crude oil, not mist. You can tell because of the color.
Oh my god, the Lord Ruler destroyed BP and oh my god, Vin works for the fucking oil companies.
I think he spent all those 1,000 years just like washing little ducks with Dawn soap.
I think so. He seems like that kind of guy, I think. But yeah, she gets fucked up by that spirit, and she's like, well, I'm never going to go hang out with that dude ever again.
Well, and then this is the other thing, too. I think Vin, there's too many character things going on for Vin that aren't cohesive. Because then she's like, the mist were my strength, and now I'm, like, starting to be afraid of them. Which is, like, that is, like, there's interesting character things with Vin, but there's, like, so many of them. Like, each plot line has also its own Vin character thing, which also makes it hard to care.
You're right. I didn't even think about that.
Like, Vin in the mist is like, she's scared of the mist. Vin with Zane is like, oh, I'm just being used because I'm an Allomancer. Vin with Ellen is like, do I even like him anymore? And it's like, Vin, pick a lane.
Yeah, just do one. And if I had to choose, it would be... because you wouldn't have to rewrite the whole book to have her actually being used by Ellen. It would be this one, the mist. Being afraid of the mist. Because she's like, what if she gets betrayed not by a person, but by the one thing she thinks she can control, which is like her magic and the nighttime. Which might be what, like, that is obvious, like, to me, I feel like what it's trying to go for. But if we gotta do that and this other shit, dude, I am gonna get exhausted by the end of this fucking book.
Mm-hmm. And I could also see a way you could, like, because it feels the same thing, like, oh, Ellen, she's just being used, and also Ellen's turning to someone I don't like. Like, there's a way you can combine that into, like, sort of one thing.
Yeah, which I don't, I think it just would have been better. It just could be done better than this.
Well, because the first book is like, the criticism is Vin's too much one note. This is like, she's not one note now, is she? She's going through a lot of things at once, and it's confusing and messy, and you don't know what to care about.
Yeah, her and Ellen's relationship I never thought was weird until about 300 pages in or whatever. She's talking to Tindwyl, and they're like, what even are you guys? And she's like, oh, I have no idea. Like, what do you mean? You guys kiss and hold hands all the fucking time. What do you mean you don't know what you are?
Then you also see a version of the book where, like, you know, Vin's never been in a relationship before, and she can struggle with that. And it's like, but then you also have, like, the world-saving part of it. So, again, it's, like, trying to do a lot.
Also, it could have just been avoided by making Elend... Why Elend has to be such a goody two-shoes good guy is so bizarre. Just make him actually use Vin. Like, send her out. Yeah. And, like, you'd be like, wow, Ellen, that's fucked up. And then when Vin comes to that realization through Zane, then it's like, oh, shit. We have an actual character moment we can build to. And aside from Ellen literally being like, you should go to sleep and eat this food and not kill for me. And she's like, I'm being used. Like, what are you talking about?
Or, like, Ellen betraying Vin. Like, just 100%. And you know the fact that I said it and I read the books, you know. You also, you know what kind of books these are. That doesn't really happen.
I was never thinking that was going to happen. The one thing that I can foresee, and I think is probably going to happen, is that Elend is going to become like a legit king, and that means that the divide between them is going to grow even larger. But Elend is a good guy. He is the good guy, and Vin is the character who maybe will be tainted by the dark side.
Okay, we got a lot of plot to get through here. So Vin gets attacked by the mist monster thing, and then she remembers that in Elendi's logbook from the first book, there may be some other pages that we didn't get in the first book that she then reads.
Like, what the fuck?
And like, oh, it mentions this mist wraith. It mentions the same thing, that Elendi had a mist spirit following him.
And I don't know why. I mean, I know that it's a book and that it needs to be long, but why does she not immediately put it together that she's the hero? Like, I don't get it. She hears the Well of Ascension. Like, literally, she's like, what's that?
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean, what's that? Just do it already. Like, this is, like, the book is not interesting enough for me to want to see Vin come to those conclusions. Just get there.
Yeah, because you don't, because that's the thing, because you don't trust that, like, you can make it interesting, or that you care enough about Vin and how it might affect her and her relationships. Because you know on a deep level, like, it won't. Because it hasn't shown to. Like, you know.
She's going to get to the well.
She's going to become the hero of ages, get to the Well of Ascension, take up all the power, save the world. And she's going to be like, but maybe I'll still going to betray me. Like, she's not going to change.
I know. I really think none of this shit at all is in the first book. Okay? Obviously, you, the reader, can draw the conclusion fucking instantly that she's the hero of ages. I think the book wants you to think it's Kelsier, but if you thought it was Kelsier for a second, you need to go back to English class in the ninth grade. Because no, it's Vin. The interesting part is that, like, Vin is struggling with the same shit that the guy is struggling with, the old hero. He's like, through Quan's perspective, he's like, oh, this person is, Elendi is different now. Like, he's killing people and, like, raising armies and doing this shit. And Vin isn't raising armies, but she's killing people and being violent. And the fact that she is not instantly like, what the hell, is so frustrating to me. Because, like, that would be a fine character thing for her to be like, oh my god, like, just come to that we're halfway through the fucking book and she hasn't come to the realization. I will cut off my penis on a live version of this podcast if she isn't the hero.
Okay, so we have to talk about the rest of this section.
Yeah.
So Zane, we find out Zane is Straff's son by one of his many like concubine people who he has sex with to try to make a lot of allomancers.
It's crazy.
Good evil villain stuff.
It is good evil villain stuff. Straff is awesome.
The bad guys, like, you know, the mist kills people. Like, that's a vague source of threat. Like, how do you even stop that? It's everywhere. Whatever. Straff is like a good villain. The Lord Ruler,
yes, he is.
Like, you never saw him, but he was like the villain. And that's the other thing, like, it felt like it was missing. Like, there wasn't a good villain. Like, the Steel Inquisitors are basically robots, and the Lord Ruler wasn't in the book until the last, like, 10 pages.
And he died.
And then he died. And so this, like, Straff is like, you know, personal relationship, fucking crazy. He has a crazy henchman. And Zane hears thoughts in his head that everyone he looks at, the voice says, kill him. You should kill him. Is he bothering you? Kill him.
And that voice is God, it is referred to in the book. Which is, I think, is kind of cringy, but it's a cool character detail.
What's your take on that?
Like, why is it happening?
Yeah.
I think he's probably... I hate it. The characters love to call them, I'm insane. I fucking hate it. That happens so many times in these books. Kelsier's like, well, I'm insane, of course. I want to shut up.
It's a middle school cartoon character.
Yeah, I know. That's why Kelsier fucking sucks. But Zane is... he's probably, like, magically... He probably had a fucked up childhood, but so did Vin, and Vin does not hear the voice telling her to kill people. So I think that he probably has the proclivity for evil, like Vin seems to have the proclivity for good. Like, she's the hero and he's the villain, I guess, except he doesn't want to be the villain, which is important. He wants to be a cool, good guy. But he doesn't know if he can. I
mean, I like Zane. I actually, like, did this time. Like, I don't...
Oh, I like his character. I just don't like the kill him, God said.
And I think he might... I think he gets more into, like, actual love triangle territory, which I think gets kind of cringe. But, like, I think the idea of he feels like Vin can save him, I think that's an interesting dynamic. But then the issue is when you're seeing it through Vin's eyes... He's like a different person saying to Vin, like, he's just using you. But like from his own personal bit, like it's like different people. Like I think if he had one thing, it'd be solid.
Because it's interesting when he's like, he's using you because that's what he thinks. He's not. And Vin shouldn't believe him, but she starts to. Which is where it goes wrong. I think it's fine for Zane to say that, because he thinks it, because Straff uses him, and so he just must assume that Elend is using Vin.
Or have Vin have actual doubts about Elend, you know? But they've been together for like a year. They've had a relationship for like a year, so that's hard to actually do, you know?
Founded on a lie, by the way. They fell in love with each other when she was betraying his trust, and that is not part of the book.
Yep.
Don't worry about that.
Don't worry about it. It doesn't affect anyone on any deep level. They're fine.
No.
So the other cool thing about Straff is he lets people poison him.
That was
and
fucking...
then he's like, you're trying to poison
awesome.
me. And then later he like gets an antidote from his like antidote woman. Like that's what makes him a cool villain. He's like, hemlock today? Good try, buddy. And Zane's like, fuck, I thought that would have worked this time.
It's so good that he drinks it, and then as soon as Zane leaves, he's like, give me the antidote now. That's so good.
One of the last big things that happens is Sazed still trudging on back to Luthadel. He comes across the army of Kolas in the field. And they were mentioned, we never talked about them in the first book. They were mentioned in the first book a couple times. And they are violent blue like hulks who don't stop growing, but their skin is always the same size. And it is discovered that Elend's old friend Jastes is leading them, and he's kind of funny.
He is funny.
Because he thinks he's in control and keeps telling Sazed he's like in control. And Sazed's like, dude, you're hanging on by a thread here.
And it's funny that he's like, you're my servant now. And Sazed is like, no. And he goes, very well. He doesn't force Sazed to be his... He's like, interesting. Yes, I agree.
Sazed's like, I'm going to leave. And he's like, no, you can't. I'll send the guards after you. He's like, so there are few are guarding you from the Kolas? He's like, never mind.
Yeah, I like that scene. And the Kolas are... I don't know. They don't really do anything for me, I guess. I think that they're described as being cool, but they're just another fantasy, barbaric society. They might become interesting. I wish that, I don't know, maybe one of our main characters, they weren't all fucking white humans. I feel like we could have done... Oh, I mean, one of them is a dog. But I feel like maybe there could have been more of this in the first book. We're like, oh, not everybody looks the exact same.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Well, I mean, the people from Terrace are ostensibly brown-skinned.
That's true. Wow. Yeah.
So, you know, there we go. Check that. Again, like, on a technicality, is like, we've got brown people and we've got blue people, so you can't say they're all white people.
I was thinking about this a lot when we were reading this. You said, I think in probably the first episode of the last book, you said that or in the previous book rather, you said that you really wish there was another woman, and I agreed with you then, but I think you were saying that because I hated everybody, so I didn't really care who they were, but in this book I'm like, yeah, and there is another woman, but this is not what I meant. I did not mean Oloria or whatever. That's not what I meant.
Yeah. Well, and Tindwyl, I guess, is a woman. But, like, again, supporting role to teach the boiled man-child how to do stuff.
To say that this book does not pass the Bechdel test would be a thundering understatement.
But yes, this is where Set's daughter escapes from the army, asks for asylum because she has a thing for Breeze. Her name's Alrianne, and she's very traditionally feminine in every way, and that's all we know so far.
Yeah, I really hope she's not just there for comedy, because I will hang myself. They're having like a meeting. By the way, there's a shit ton of crew meetings in this book, but I actually think they're all good.
Yeah, they make sense. It's not like
the same thing. The inexplicable 2 crew meetings where they talk about the same stuff in the first book. No, she listens to them talk, and she kind of comes around the corner and is like, what are you talking about? And she's dressed really nice, but her hair is disheveled. And Ellen is like, she must have been listening. Which I was like, oh my god, she's a spy. She's like an Allomancer spy. I thought that was so cool. She's like, thought there was a party. I don't get the impression that she was a spy. I think that'd be awesome. But I think it would be awesome, and I also think it'd be really stupid because that's the most obvious spy in the whole world.
The one that comes from the other army.
Yeah, it just says, "Can I come in?"
And now this is actually the part of the book where Vin and Orsur have the nice scene about Kandra and the contract and being used. I love this scene. It was great.
This is probably my favorite part of the 2 chapters, honestly, aside from the ending of part 2. Or the 2 parts, not 2 chapters. I really like that there's a moment where Orsur says something about Kandra that might help Vin in her search for the spy, but she decides not to say anything because she knows if she does, he will close up again. That's so cool. I was like, oh my god, so Brandon Sanderson has talked to somebody.
Yeah, like once it's rooted in something, like I think once it's not like so clinical, like that's like a moment you discover while you're writing. That's not like an outline moment. And I think that's like some of the stuff, the twists and stuff feel like, Brandon Sanderson has never not used a twist that he could have,
Yeah. Yeah. And I like that here, Vin comes to the realization that they're pretty much the exact same. And I like that he likes being a dog because I like the fact that there's a talking dog in the book. Big fan that there's a talking dog.
Talking dog that can like open its shoulder and put a little vial of metal in.
Oh, God, that was fucked up. But yeah.
And I like that it finally... I'd forgotten about this too because we were complaining about like, why does Vin irrationally just hate Kandra? And I feel like she just was, and then this was... I don't think it was planned that this was why she was.
Yeah, no, definitely.
I think this
not.
was
because
I think this feels like a good explanation of like, oh, it's because, Kelsier trusted you more than he trusted me.
And that's not what it is. It's explicitly in the first book that he ate his bones.
Yeah. And that's it.
That's what it is. Yep.
And then this scene is finally like, maybe he realized like, that doesn't really hold a lot of water if I want to make this Vin character seem like a real person.
And I think that's a fine enough reason. And I also like how he's just like, hey, I'm sorry, but no, like that's not, he told me not to do that.
So next is when Ellen and Vin go to the parlay at Straff's camp, and there's a whole build up to this about like the politics and the assembly, and Ellen has to get permission, but whatever, who cares? He got permission. He sort of strong-armed the assembly to go to do a parlay at Straff's, and their plan is to double team, sort of play both sides. It'd be like, okay, we'll ally with Straff, and then they'll go to Set and be like, ally with Set to like make them attack each other and hopefully somehow retain control of the city.
Which, as far as plans go, this is a fucked situation. It's not a terrible plan.
No, it's pretty good.
And there's no whiteboard where Kelsier writes jokes on it. So there's that.
And they talk about it long enough to like brainstorm and arrive at it, but not so long that we have to show how this idea happens in real time. Like, you can just say that they had this idea. Like, we don't need to have a meeting where everyone gives their 2 cents and then our main character has the genius idea that makes the plan happen. So they go to the meeting. It's not going well. Ellen's trying to like...
Oh, wait. Sorry, just one important thing in the story of the book, I guess. Vin has gone dress shopping, and I know what you're thinking. That doesn't sound very important, but you're right, it's not. But it is an excuse to get her in front of a lot of people, and when that happens, the Church of the Survivor people again are like begging her for help, and she is learning to be like a queen, like in this moment of, or like a royal protector, I guess, which is what she really is.
And let's count them. That is Vin's 4th character journey, because when she's with Tindwyl, it's about how does she deal with being the heir to the Survivor.
I didn't even think about that. Fuck, there's too much going on.
And then you don't make progress to each of them. It's like it swung the other way. Like the first book had Vin is too one note, but like, and this is like Vin has too many things.
So that means that the third book, we got to go right in the middle.
One would hope, right?
You've read this before without any spoilers. Is there a satisfying conclusion to any of these character journeys? In this book, not...
I don't remember a lot from this book.
That does not fill me with confidence.
And that's the thing. Did you remember, like the first book, like you remember how the plot twists made you feel? And that's...
Yeah, what did you remember, like, of the first... You were saying you kind of vaguely remembered... You remembered all the important bits, and then you realized you were attributing parts from, like, this book and the third book onto the first one. What were the marquee moments so far in the series that you remembered?
So far, like, from the first book, I'm like, all right, first book, Allomancy, they kill the Lord... Kelsier dies, they kill the Lord Ruler.
One of those things is immediate, and then the other two are in the last 10 pages.
Yeah, I also remember, like, in terms of like good character moment, when Kelsier gets enraged at Marsh's death and destroys the pits of Hethseen. Like, I think that was cool. I remember that as well. From this book, I think it's stuff that came later. I think I also read them super fast, and I took a long time to read this one. And I think that's why I'm having a hard time too rereading, that it's like the first time I read them, it's very like, you know, turn on a bit of TV at night before you go to bed. Like this was my like read a little bit before I go to bed book, don't think too much about it. But now that like we're in a podcast, we're talking about this in this spectrum of like fantasy, sci-fi, literature, where I'm like not having a crisis, but like feel a little bit like I've been duped. Yeah. into feeling like these books are maybe better than they are. And I think that comes down to the character stuff, where like once you know what's going to happen and you know the revelations about the world, like what is left? And it's sort of characters who do things, and it's stuff that doesn't affect them in any serious, meaningful way. And so then you don't really care about them.
I think it also comes down to crazy good advertising. Like, if you've never read this book, you would probably think, based on the advertising and social media and, like, TikTok and stuff, you'd probably think this is the greatest book series ever written. Like, the way people talk about it.
And I think, again, people remember, and me too, like, and, like, how you're getting involved. Like, I think it's volume of things add up to, like, feeling an emotion of, like, wow, this is cool, you know? Which is fine. I think that's good. But I don't know how well it stands on reread.
Yeah, this is not one I think I will ever go back to, unless we do a retrospective, which might be fun.
And then maybe, like, I think the last one might, because there's, you know, the whole Cosmere stuff, like things tie in with other books in the whole shared universe. But like, because this was early on, this is like the first book series in that section, there's not a lot of interesting things.
Yeah, because there's nothing to reference back to, or like, that's all in the other books, I assume. I have no idea what that stuff looks like, so unless I do, I mean, I've read The Way of Kings. I'm sure there's little bits in there, but I don't know.
All right, so parlay at Straff's. Ellen tries his play, doesn't go well.
Instantly, it doesn't go well.
Instantly doesn't go well. And Straff's like, I'm going to fucking kill you here. And then Ellen's like, oh, shit. And then Ellen threatens Straff to be like, hey, you know, if you kill me, Vin is going to kill you. Because she's super powerful. And they do like a cool trick where Vin's like outside the tent, is super powerful with Straff's emotions, and he lets him go. While Zane is like, I also didn't understand this. Like, while Zane's just standing there, like, whispering in her ear while she's doing this.
It was weird. That was what I meant when, like, there's two things happening at once. There's the plot and the character. Mm-hmm. This is what I was referring to when you made that point. Of, like, it's literally through a wall, different parts of the story are happening. Mm-hmm. And this is when Zane is like, he's using you, you know? And, like, in this instant, correct. But this is the first time.
Does Vin not understand that this is the only way, this play is the only way that Ellen gets out of there alive?
Yeah, and she's like so pissed when they go back, and it's like
what?
It doesn't make any sense.
No. And like, you know, it would if like she started having her doubts, and like you could see how it would could tie in where like Ellen is changing, and maybe there are a couple times where he sort of uses her and they don't have a lot of time to talk, and maybe he's more distant now or something. And I think it's almost trying to do that, but it doesn't.
It just didn't set it up.
No. It set up a lot of other things with a lot of other characters.
Yeah, I know. It would work better if he made a promise that like, oh, I'll never make you do anything for me ever. And then he does do this, and it's like not the last gambit. The fact that it's what he says last and is a last-ditch effort to stay alive makes me not buy that she should be upset. If he goes in there and they've like developed this plan and he throws it all out the window, and in like a moment of like, we'll just kill you, like he just says that right away, then Vin can be like, what? Like, you're different now. And that also would not be very good because it comes out of nowhere, but at least it's something.
Well, and that's also the other thing, too, is, like, you know that no matter what happens, it's not going to affect the characters too deeply or seriously in a way that's going to change them.
So they leave.
They make it back.
They leave and no headway has been made? Or are they going to do an alliance, or what's going on?
I don't know. I think it's like he just threatened him, and that's where they are. I think they haven't talked about the implications, because as soon as he gets to the castle, he's like, message for you, sir.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
And he's like, and then he reads it, and the assembly's like, you're not king anymore. We did a vote of no confidence. And that's where part 2 ends.
Which sets up exciting stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's like plot stuff. Like a plot thing happened. Oh, how are they going to get out of this jam?
Yeah, but I feel like, and it's interesting because that's just because there's no weight. I can literally feel the story being like, well, it can't just be that there's 2 armies outside of Luthadel the whole time, so something else needs to happen. And so he'll be deposed. And it's like, why? What has he been doing in the whole year? He got the vote to do the plan, a majority vote.
Well, and I could tell how it was set up too. Like there were 2 or 3 sentences where like he skipped some assembly meetings. Like that's how he set it up. Like, oh, we'll talk about them at the next assembly meeting because he was busy with something.
He is the king, and there's a siege, so maybe he doesn't have time to, I don't know, hang out and talk shop with the fellas.
So what did you think about this book, beginning of the second book, like overall as a whole?
I know we were shitting on it for probably like 90 minutes there, but I am actually enjoying it. And I don't know if I'm just enjoying it because the last one was terrible. But this is good. And this is fun and interesting. So I'm enjoying it. And actually, like, when part 2 ended, I was upset I could not go right in to see what happens next.
And that's, I think, that's the experience of these books. Like, that's how I felt too.
Like, that's fine. That's fine to have them just be sort of popcorn things. I just don't like it when they try to be something more or fail at even being a coherent popcorn thing.
Or, like, if you're not inherently interested in just reading about a magic system devoid from people.
That was terrible. I'm just happy that has not happened. Actually, it does with the Feruchemy stuff.
A little bit,
but for whatever reason,
better.
I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting and cool. And I wasn't bored to tears. I think it's because this is happening while he's going somewhere.
And he's using it. Like, he knows how to use it, and he's using it.
Yeah, and it's just him doing it, which is cool. And also, ferrochemy is pretty cool, so that helps. I don't necessarily think allomancy is all that cool. I think ferrochemy is cool.
Mm-hmm. Everything I thought I've already said in terms of like rereading. Like, the character stuff for me is just too all over the place to get a lot out of it. And so I haven't found a lot to, which is like, to me, is like depressing. Because I think I really like them. And I'm sort of feeling like rereading them is like overwriting my previous positive memories from them. And maybe it's just the context where we're rereading it, that like you have to analyze it. Or
these books don't hold up to a close read. There's a reason that in your English 405 course they don't do Mistborn. Like, some books just don't really hold up to that kind of scrutiny.
Well, and I'm reading reviews too. I'm like, am I just going crazy? People are like, well, what don't you like about it? And other people say, like, if you like magic systems and plot, it's good. But but the character stuff is lacking. And in my mind, I'm like, what is a book without good characters?
Yeah, it's nothing. It's a pamphlet.
Yeah, and so I've been doing like soul searching about like what makes good characters. And like you have to want to, like, as a writer, or at least this is what I like. Like, you have to be a bit of a masochist to be a good writer, where you have to take characters you care about and literally make horrible things happen to them. And I think part of this book, and what makes them feel YA or makes them feel less engaging from a character's perspective, is like a lot of things are treated like with kid gloves, and I think the characters are too. It's like they're not allowed to go through anything too dire,
which is weird, because I feel like it's just I keep going back to the Way of Kings, so I'm sorry, but I feel like characters go through dire shit in that book. So like, he is capable.
I think he gets better. And I read something online where I think doing the end of the Wheel of Time helped with this stuff.
I would agree with that, but I think it's important to keep in mind that, like, do you think he learned a lot because he didn't set up any of the shit he had to ship out? He just wrapped it up. So it's like us. Like, imagine if this is all we had. I could wrap it up. Like, yeah. But I can't. I don't have the ability to set up this world and then deliver on it.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. I just think maybe in his writing career, he finds interesting ways to show us things, and maybe gets over a little bit of this kind of weird squeamishness about violence, whether that's through magic swords that they don't slice, they just kind of kill you. Or but there's violent shit in the Stormlight Archives. There's crazy violent shit in those books. So I don't know, it's weird. It's super weird that there's like this dissonance in this book with the violence.
It'll be interesting for me to go back and read Stormlight Archive and think about like this same character stuff.
I'm looking forward to it because I have read that first book. So I wonder if, and that was my first Brandon Sanderson book, so I wonder if the same thing that's happening to you with Mistborn will happen to me, where I'm like, oh my God.
I will say this. I think, honestly, this could just be I've been hoodwinked again. But I do think Stormlight Archive is more solid than these.
When we do our episode on that, I want, before us talking, if it sucks, to be that audio clip of you saying like, I no way I got hoodwinked again, right? And then it's the same conversations.
And I think I'm feeling like my experience with these books so far, which I think, I can't trust myself anymore, because I'm like, okay, the third one will be like I remember it. And I think it will be to a certain extent. I think from the plot twist, lore reveal stuff is super cool and satisfying and interesting. But I think characters in this world, I'm just like feeling a lot of like wasted potential. Because like I am on a reread liking Vin more, liking Elend more. Like my first reread, there were sort of like puppets that had to be around to make the cool plot happen. But now I'm like paying attention to them a little bit more. And we're like, okay, I can sort of see that there are characters under all this stuff, but it's pulled in too many directions and it's sort of like squeamish about making them go through too much.
Yeah, that's bizarre to me. I really don't get it. Unless it comes back to being Mormon.
Or maybe he feels as though he is putting them through the ringer. And that's just his barometer of the ringer is different. Is just different, you know.
But I feel like even in fucking Percy Jackson goes through the ringer more than fucking Vin does.
Yeah.
Or like Harry Potter. I think Harry Potter sucks and fuck J.K. Rowling. But fucking Harry Potter.
Harry like suffers. His friends die.
Yes. Like there's no.
He loses. He has to get thrown out of the only place he's ever called home. Like
he doesn't stumble across the troll being killed. They fight the troll. Like I don't know. It's just weird. Or they don't have long. There's no 2 classroom conversations in the first Harry Potter book that are the exact same. It's just the next day he has to go to the same class again. Like I thought we did this. It's a review day. Like I thought we did this already.
Yeah, I can't believe we're talking about Harry Potter as like the high watermark of how to do like character.
It's a bad sign. Well, that shout out to the Shrieking Shack podcast. They do they are jaded, lapsed Harry Potter fans who are. I think they've already reread all the books and they have come to the conclusion that they fucking suck. But the first one is good. The Philosopher's Stone or Sorcerer's Stone or whatever is good and has good. That is a children's book, but YA character moments that I haven't actually read Percy Jackson. I only know Harry Potter, so that's why I'm doing it. And that feels like the closest comparison, which seems like an insane sentence to say. But I don't know, man. There's ways to have characters go through things without. You don't have to do it doesn't have to be violent. Like you wrote the book. You can make it whatever you want. It doesn't have to be. You didn't have to make it like this crazy oppressive society. The fact that you made it means that you have to deal with it, and you're not dealing with it.
Yeah, or deal with like, okay, you want to have characters, you want to have character growth. Like it has to really affect them in a deep way, like consistently.
It feels like just like coloring characters darker shades of like poop brown. It's just like it's yeah, but it's still brown. Like it's still the same color. Like it doesn't I don't know. They're not different people. She's a little sadder in this scene.
Mm-hmm. And I guess that it's not like someone's going to be a new color. There's just going to be a different shade of the same color. And that's sort of what I'm feeling like I want. Maybe just where I am as like a reader in my reading life is like I want more from a reading experience or a rereading experience.
I think what you're saying is you want to see trees that are blue and even purple or green.
What? That doesn't make any sense. I don't even know what you're talking about. And what color's the sky? Blue? Might as well be yellow. I don't know.
I will say, though, right before we wrap up here, because I feel like we're at the end, I do like that Zane, I forgot that only Tin Eyes and what are they called? Mistborn. Oops. Mistborn can see the stars. That's just a fun world building fact that I
totally missed that. I think there's chunks of this book where I was sort of zoning out, skimming.
Zane points to the sky outside of the tent and is like, he can't see those, and they look at the stars, which is cool.
The Sanderson is great as those little like world building flourishes. Like every time you find one, you're like, ooh, what a little treat. But like it's unfortunate that like they're a treat among it's like rice. Like rice is good, but it's just rice, you know.
There's like a piece of it's bland rice, but if you dig around enough every once in a while, there's like a fine. It's like okay chicken.
And hey, there's nothing wrong with rice. Like, sometimes you just want to eat a bowl of rice. But it's hard to, dissect rice on a hour-long cooking show.
Yeah.
Because it's just rice.
Right. Yeah, that's totally what is happening. I'm excited to do a book that's good, and we'll talk about things like...
That's good. And again, it's so hard because I don't want to feel like I'm shitting on these that they're bad. Because they're not bad. They're not like trash pulp novels. Like, clearly he cares. He likes them. I read them. I liked them. Do I like them now? I need to finish, and I need to have a whole emotional journey, and then we'll come back to how Danylo's feeling about these books.
I think that'll be a good final episode of this whole Mistborn saga. Is we'll do the how is Danylo feeling, and it'll be like one of those like solo philosophize this kind of podcast where it's just like a guy like oh my god, I can't believe it.
Mac, I'm gonna send you a yellow manila envelope with one cassette tape in it, and it's going to be my thoughts after the Hero of Ages, and you will never hear from me again.
Yeah, and suicide.
I wasn't gonna go there. I was gonna say like I moved to Zambia or something, but
you moved to Zambia to try to write the competing Mistborn novel, the missing fourth
Born
book,
Mist,
because the ending
Born
sucked.
Mist,
Born Mist, yeah, with Jimmy Marsh.
With Jimmy Marsh.
Wow, that's a callback, ladies and gentlemen.
All right, well, we'll play you out with some tunes by the inimitable Jimmy Marsh.
Jimmy Marsh, ladies and gentlemen.